Okay, like in this video we're going to look again at pivot tables, but specifically we're going to focus on adding fields onto a table at a later point in time, then see how that affects your pivot table. Let's begin by turning this information into a pivot table. Step 1, click somewhere in your list, click on Insert, click on Table. Your table has headers, click OK. We know that we have a Excel table because our field names at the top all have these downward arrows, which would allow us to filter our table. Once again, this is a very important point in the sense that I feel to keep your pivot table dynamic. It's very important to take your initial data or initial list and turn that list into an Excel table, which is what we did. So that's step number 1. Turn your list into an Excel table. So we have our table. The next thing, I think it's very important to name the table. Click here on Design. We're going to name it Data. After doing that, we're going to turn our table into a pivot table. We do that simply by clicking on Insert, Pivot Table. Here's our table data. Click OK. These are our fields for our pivot table. Okay, we have our fields listed here. And as a result, we can easily show sales based upon date, by region, by sales rep, customer, product, because the fields are already listed. However, our boss has come to us and said, well, I also want to see sales by gender and by age. However, we don't have those fields listed. So what we have to do is we have to go back to the underlying table, that initial table, and then add those fields. And that's what we're going to do next. So I'm going to click here on the sheet called Mr. Excel Pivot Example. This is our underlying table. The name of that table was called Data. What I'm going to do is go up to cell H1, and I'm going to add a field called Age. Then I'm going to add a field called Gender. What we see is that by doing that, Excel has added these fields to our table. The only problem is there's no information that's showing for age or for gender. So I'm going to randomly, for age anyways, fill in an age for each of the records. I'm going to use a formula. And I'm going to do this for 2 reasons: to show you how this information will be updated to your pivot table, but also show you the power of a plain table in and of itself. I'm going to click on f of x, and I'm just going to use a function called rand between. And I'm going to randomly assign ages to each of the records. Once again, it's random. The reason why I'm doing this is just to fill the table with an age for each record, so we can use it in our pivot table. Bottom number will be 18. Top number will be 65. It's a rand between function. Click OK. What I really wanted to show you is that all the rows are now populated. I didn't have to go in and copy that formula. It's one of the powers of a table. If you apply a formula to one cell, it's copied downward. Let's go into gender and try to figure out a way how we can apply gender to the pivot table. Right now, there's nothing in there. We have a whole group of sales reps. We're not quite sure how many there are. So how do we apply gender? In order to do that, to populate this field here, I'm going to go back to my pivot table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take sales rep and also sales. Let's format that information. Number format, currency. To show the headers, what I do is click on Design, Report Layout, Show in Tabular Form. So what we know now is that these are our unique sales reps. There aren't all that many of them. Well, I could go in and go back to the original table and start typing in row by row, but there's an easier way of doing that. And I'm going to use a VLOOKUP to populate that underlying table. So I'm going to do that by copying down or highlighting the names, highlighting them, right click, copy, go into a blank sheet, right click, paste. So we have the beginnings of a table. The names are listed in the A column, and in the B column I'm going to apply the gender. So what we've actually created is an underlying table for our VLOOKUP. We have our names over here, and then the associated gender in the second column. So what I want to do is I want to highlight that table, give a name to that table, and I'm going to call it gender. I'm going to go back to my underlying table, not the pivot table, but the underlying table, which has no information in it. And I'm going to use the VLOOKUP to populate that field. VLOOKUP, my lookup value is the name, so I'm going to click on Luke. My table array is called gender. The column index is 2, and I want an exact match. Click OK, and everything is now populated. We should be ready to get this information in the pivot table. Let's go back to the pivot table, check our fields. However, they're not showing yet. What we need to do next is, now we're within the pivot table, click on Options, come over here to Refresh, and refresh all. Once again, what's happened here is that the two new field names, age and gender, that we added to our table are now appearing within our pivot table. That can only happen if those field names are added to a table. If it was just a plain list, we wouldn't be able to do that. It shows the dynamic part of a table. It's changing with any information that you're putting into it. So we have our two new field names. And once again, how we showed them, we updated our table. We then came into our pivot table, clicked on Options, Refresh All. They're now appearing. I can get rid of my, well, I'm going to leave sales rep here. Let's go over here with gender. And it's showing the information that our boss has asked for. We could even pull out the sales rep, bring down the age. So we're now showing by age and by gender what our sales is. So age is in our row column or row area. Gender is in our column area. The ages, gender, then the total sales. The boss would probably want us to group by age, and all we would have to do there is click within the cell, or right click, group, starting point at 18. Excel has determined that. The highest number is 65, and we're going to have breaks by 10. Click on OK. So we've been able to calculate the sales by age and gender by updating our original table, which is dynamic. By updating our original table, it will also show within our pivot table. Thank you.